I don't believe in miracles, or at least, I didn't. I'm a geologist, a man of science, someone who trusts data and evidence and things I can measure with instruments. But what happened to me on Christmas Day in the Sierra Nevada in 2019 defies every logical explanation I've tried to apply to it. I've spent 5 years analyzing it, researching it, trying to rationalize it, and I still can't. 3 people saw something that shouldn't exist. We all have the same memory of events that, according to physics and biology and common sense, simply couldn't have happened. So either we all experienced the same mass hallucination, or something occurred in those mountains that I will never fully understand. This is my attempt to tell you what I saw, what I felt, and why it changed everything I thought I knew about reality. My name is David. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of the day I stopped being certain about anything. It was supposed to be a routine expedition. I'd been hired by a mining company to survey a remote section of the Sierra Nevada for mineral deposits. The timing was unfortunate, right during the holidays, but the money was good, and I was recently separated from my wife, so spending Christmas alone in a hotel room versus alone in the mountains didn't seem like much of a difference. At least in the mountains I'd be working, staying busy, keeping my mind occupied with something other than the divorce papers sitting unsigned on my kitchen table. I brought 2 people with me. My graduate assistant Tommy, who was 23 and eager to get field experience, and our guide, a local named Sarah who'd been leading expeditions in these mountains for 15 years. Sarah was in her mid-40s, quiet, competent, the kind of person who inspired confidence without saying much. Tommy was the opposite, constantly talking, asking questions, pointing out every interesting rock formation like he'd discovered something revolutionary. We started our hike on December 23rd, planning to spend 3 days collecting samples and taking measurements. The weather forecast was clear, cold, obviously, but stable. We had proper gear, detailed maps, satellite communication devices, everything by the book. I'm methodical about safety, maybe overly so. My ex-wife used to say I planned the spontaneity out of everything. She wasn't wrong. The first 2 days were exactly what I expected. We hiked to our survey points. I collected rock samples. Tommy took readings with our equipment. Sarah kept us on track and set up camp each night. The mountains were beautiful in that stark winter way. Everything was white and blue and silent. The kind of silence that's almost aggressive, that makes you aware of every sound you make. On Christmas Eve, we reached our final survey point, a ridge about 9,000 feet up. The view was incredible. You could see for miles, nothing but peaks and valleys covered in snow, untouched and ancient. We were completely alone out there. The nearest town was 20 miles away. We hadn't seen another person in 2 days. That night, Sarah cooked something she called wilderness chili over our camp stove, which was basically beans and freeze-dried meat and enough hot sauce to make you forget you were eating rations. Tommy complained about not being home for Christmas. He had a girlfriend, Nicole, who he talked about constantly. He was supposed to propose to her on New Year's Eve. He showed us the ring he'd brought with him, a small diamond on a silver band, kept safe in a waterproof case in his pack. Sarah told stories about previous expeditions, close calls with weather, a bear encounter that ended with everyone running in different directions. I mostly stayed quiet, eating my chili, watching the fire, trying not to think about my own empty apartment waiting for me back home. Around 10 p.m. it started snowing. Not a blizzard, just a steady, light snowfall that made everything feel even more isolated. We went to our tents, planning to start the hike back to civilization first thing in the morning. I remember lying in my sleeping bag, listening to the snow against the tent fabric, thinking about how this was probably the loneliest Christmas Eve of my life. But there was something peaceful about it too. Like the loneliness was honest, not hidden behind forced smiles and pretending everything was fine. I woke up around 6 a.m. on Christmas morning to Tommy yelling, not screaming, just loud, urgent calling. "David, Sarah, you need to see this." I unzipped my tent, annoyed because I'd finally been sleeping well, and stepped out into ankle-deep fresh snow. Tommy was standing about 30 feet from camp, pointing down into the valley below our ridge. "There's someone down there," he said. I saw movement. Sarah emerged from her tent, already fully dressed somehow. She grabbed her binoculars and looked where Tommy was pointing. I couldn't see anything at first, just snow and rocks and a steep drop-off. But then Sarah handed me the binoculars and said, "There, near those boulders." I looked, and I saw him. A man, sitting in the snow. Just sitting there, not moving. He was wearing what looked like a light jacket, jeans, and regular shoes. No winter gear, no backpack, nothing that would keep someone alive in these conditions. "How did he get down there?" Tommy asked. "We didn't see anyone yesterday." The valley he was in was accessible, but not easily. You'd have to climb down a pretty steep slope, and there was no clear reason why anyone would be there. No trails, no survey markers, nothing worth visiting. "We need to check on him," Sarah said. Her voice had that calm, professional tone that meant she was already planning the rescue. "He's probably hypothermic, could be disoriented." We packed emergency supplies, a first aid kit, extra blankets, heat packs, and started making our way down. It took us about 45 minutes to reach the valley floor, moving carefully because the slope was icy. The whole time, the man didn't move. He just sat there, and I kept thinking we were going to find a body, someone who'd gotten lost and given up. When we got close, maybe 50 feet away, he turned his head and looked at us. That's when I felt the first spike of real fear. Not concern, fear. His eyes were wrong. I know how that sounds. But they were too bright, too aware for someone who should be in the late stages of hypothermia. And he was smiling. This small, peaceful smile like he'd been expecting us. "Are you okay?" Sarah called out. "Do you need help?" He stood up, smoothly, easily, like he'd just been resting and not sitting in negative-degree weather in clothes that wouldn't keep you warm in a mall. "I'm all right," he said. His voice was clear, steady. "Thank you for coming." We approached carefully. I was scanning him for signs of frostbite, injury, confusion. But he looked fine. Better than fine. His skin wasn't pale or mottled. His lips weren't blue. He wasn't shivering. Tommy and I were shivering, and we were wearing layers of high-tech winter gear. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. "Where's your equipment?" "I don't have any," he said simply. "I don't need it." Sarah and I exchanged a look. Delusion, probably. Advanced hypothermia can make people feel warm, make them think they're fine when they're not. "Listen," Sarah said gently. "You're in danger out here. We need to get you warmed up and out of these mountains. Can you walk?" "I can walk," he said, "but I'm not leaving yet." He looked at each of us, taking his time, like he was memorizing our faces. "You three are supposed to be here. This is where you need to be right now." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Tommy took a step back. "Man, you're freaking me out," he said. "Are you on something?" The stranger, I didn't know what else to call him, shook his head. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so are you, Tommy." None of us had introduced ourselves. We hadn't said our names. Tommy went pale. "How do you know my name?" "The same way I know about Nicole," the stranger said. "And the ring. And how scared you are that she'll say no." I felt my heart rate spike. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. "Who are you?" I demanded. "How do you know about us?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to Sarah. "You blame yourself," he said softly. "For what happened 8 years ago, the accident. But it wasn't your fault. He made his own choice." Sarah's face went rigid. I didn't know what he was talking about, but whatever it was, it hit her hard. "You don't know anything about me," she said, but her voice was shaking. Then he looked at me. "And you, David. You think you failed at the one thing that mattered, but you haven't. You're standing at the beginning, not the end. The papers don't matter. Sign them or don't. Either way, you'll find what you're looking for." I felt like I'd been punched. Nobody knew about the divorce papers except me and my lawyer. I hadn't told Tommy. I hadn't told Sarah. I definitely hadn't told some random guy sitting in a snowbank in the middle of nowhere. "What is this?" I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. Some kind of trick? Did someone send you? Is this a setup? No trick, he said. Just a moment. A point where paths cross. He gestured around us, at the mountains, the snow, the impossibly blue sky. This is a thin place where the boundary is permeable. I can see more here, and so can you if you let yourself. Sarah found her voice. We're taking you down the mountain. Now. You need medical attention. I don't, he said. But I'll show you something first. Something you need to see. He started walking, not toward our camp or toward any path out of the valley, but deeper in, toward a section of rocks and ice that looked impassable. We followed. I don't know why. We should have grabbed him, forced him to come with us. But there was something about him, some quality I can't describe, that made me want to see what he was leading us to. We walked for maybe 10 minutes. The stranger moved through the snow without effort, without leaving deep tracks. Tommy noticed it too. Dude, he whispered to me, is it just me, or is he barely sinking in? I'd noticed. In snow that deep, even with snowshoes, you sink. But the stranger was walking on top of it like his weight wasn't distributed normally. I told myself it was packed snow, ice underneath, something rational, but I didn't believe it. He stopped at a small clearing surrounded by rocks. In the center was a patch of ground where the snow had melted, exposing dark earth. And growing from that earth, impossibly, were flowers. Not winter flowers, not anything that should survive in these conditions. These were wildflowers, the kind you see in spring, bright yellow and purple and white, blooming like it was May instead of December. That's not possible, I said. I knelt down, touched one of the flowers. It was real, warm even. The ground around them was warm. I pulled out a thermometer from my pack, held it near the soil. 65 degrees Fahrenheit, in the middle of winter, in an area where the ambient temperature was maybe 15 degrees. Geothermal vent? Tommy suggested. But I'd surveyed this area. There was no volcanic activity, no hot springs, nothing that would explain this. Not geothermal, the stranger said. Just a reminder that life finds a way, that impossible things happen every day, that what you see isn't all there is. He knelt beside me, picked one of the flowers and handed it to Sarah. For what you lost, he said. You didn't cause it, and you're allowed to stop punishing yourself. Sarah took the flower with shaking hands. Tears were running down her face. I didn't ask what he meant. It felt too private, too sacred somehow. He picked another flower, gave it to Tommy. For Nicole. She's going to say yes, but not because of the ring, because of who you are when you stop trying so hard. Tommy clutched the flower like it was made of gold. He was crying too, openly, not even trying to hide it. Then the stranger picked a third flower and held it out to me. For you, David, because you think science and mystery are opposites. But they're not. They're two ways of seeing the same truth. You're allowed to not have all the answers. I took the flower. My hands were trembling. Who are you? I asked again. Really? What is this? He smiled. Does it matter? You'll spend years trying to figure it out. You'll come up with theories, possibilities, rational explanations, and maybe some of them will be partly true, or maybe none of them will. But you'll remember this moment, and it will change how you see everything else. He stood up, brushed snow from his jeans that should have been soaked through but looked dry. You should head back now. There's a storm coming, bigger than forecasted. You need to be off this mountain by tomorrow morning. Come with us, Sarah said. Please, we can't just leave you here. I'm not staying here, he said. I'm going where I need to go, just like you are. He looked at each of us one more time. Thank you for coming when you saw me. Not everyone would have. Then he walked away. Not back the way we came, but toward the far end of the valley, toward a steep rock face that looked unclimbable. We watched him go. Tommy called after him, but he didn't turn around. And when he reached the rock face, something happened that I still see in my dreams. He didn't climb it. He walked through it, or into it, or he just stopped existing in a way my eyes could track. One moment he was there, a figure in a light jacket moving through snow. The next moment, he wasn't. Not like he'd hidden behind something or dropped down. He just ceased to be visible. The three of us stood there in silence for probably 5 minutes. Finally, Tommy said, "Did we all just see that? Because if I'm the only one who saw that, I need psychiatric help." "We all saw it," I confirmed. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "What was he?" Sarah asked. "Not who. What?" Because by then we all knew he wasn't just a person, or not just a person in the way we understand that word. "I don't know," I said, and that was the truth. I still don't know. We made our way back to camp in a daze. The flowers we carried shouldn't have survived the hike back. They should have frozen, wilted, fallen apart. But they didn't. They stayed fresh, stayed warm to the touch. I put mine in a sample container, the kind I use for rocks, trying to preserve it. Sarah's weather radio started going off around noon. Emergency weather alert. A major storm system had suddenly developed, moving faster than predicted. We had maybe 18 hours before it hit. We broke camp immediately and started hiking out. The hike back was brutal. We pushed hard, barely stopping. The whole time, none of us talked about what we'd seen. I think we were all processing it separately, trying to make sense of it in our own ways. Tommy kept touching his pocket where he'd put the flower. Sarah was quieter than usual, lost in thought. We made it to Sarah's truck by 8 p.m. on December 26th, just as the first flakes of the storm started falling. By the time we reached town, it was a full blizzard. The road we'd driven in on was closed 30 minutes after we got through. If we'd waited, if we'd stuck to our original departure time that morning, we would have been trapped up there for days. We got rooms at a small hotel. That night, the three of us sat in the lobby, drinking coffee, finally talking about it. "He saved us," Tommy said. "That's what happened, right? He warned us about the storm, if we hadn't left when we did." "But how did he know?" I asked. "How did he know about the storm? About us, about Nicole and the ring?" I looked at Sarah. "What did he mean about 8 years ago?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I was guiding an expedition. A man in the group separated from us, against my advice. He fell. I couldn't reach him in time. His family blamed me. I blamed me." She touched the flower, which she'd placed on the table between us. "I've been carrying that for 8 years, and somehow that man in the mountains knew. He knew, and he told me it wasn't my fault." "How is that possible?" Tommy asked. "It's not," I said. "By any conventional understanding of reality, none of what happened should be possible. The flowers, the warm ground, him knowing things he couldn't know, disappearing like that. None of it makes sense. But it happened," Sarah said. "We all saw it. We all have these." She gestured at the flowers. I pulled out my sample container, opened it. The flower was still fresh, still warm. I'd been checking it obsessively. It defied everything I understood about botany, about thermodynamics. A cut flower doesn't stay alive. It doesn't generate heat. It doesn't remain perfect after being carried through a snowstorm. I spent the next week running tests on that flower. I took it to colleagues at the university. I had it analyzed for any chemical compounds that might explain its properties. I researched every possible rational explanation. Genetic modification, synthetic materials, some kind of heating element embedded in the stem. Nothing. It was a regular wildflower, common to the Sierra Nevada, blooming in spring and early summer. Except it was blooming in winter, staying alive without water or soil, producing heat that violated the laws of physics. After 3 weeks, the flower finally wilted. Not gradually, but suddenly. I checked it one morning and it was fresh. I checked it that evening and it was brown, dried, falling apart, like it had served its purpose and could finally rest. Tommy called me a week after that. "Nicole said yes," he told me. "I proposed on New Year's Eve like I planned. And David, it was perfect. I wasn't nervous. I just felt certain, like he said. She said yes because of who I am, not because of the ring or some perfect proposal. She said yes because we're supposed to be together." I congratulated him. I meant it. But after we hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking about certainty. about how I'd spent my whole life being certain about things, certain about my career path, about my marriage, about how the universe works. And all of that certainty had led me to a place where I was alone, signing divorce papers, questioning everything. What I experienced in the mountains destroyed my certainty, but it gave me something else. Wonder, maybe. The understanding that there's more to reality than what I can measure and test. That sometimes you encounter something that doesn't fit into your worldview, and instead of dismissing it or explaining it away, you have to sit with the mystery. I signed the divorce papers in January. My ex-wife and I met for coffee afterwards, and for the first time in months, we actually talked. Really talked, not fought. She told me she'd felt lonely in our marriage, like she was living with someone who'd built walls around himself. She was right. I had built walls. Walls made of facts and data, and the need to understand everything before I could accept it. "Something happened to you," she said near the end of our conversation. "You're different, softer somehow." I almost told her about the mountains, about the stranger and the flowers and the impossible warm ground. But I didn't. Some things are too big to share with someone who wasn't there. I saw something I couldn't explain, I told her instead, and I'm learning to be okay with that. She smiled. A real smile, the kind I hadn't seen from her in years. "Good," she said. "That's really good, David. I still go back to those mountains every year, around Christmas. I go to that valley, to the spot where the flowers were growing. There's nothing there now. Just snow and rocks and cold ground. No warmth, no blooms, no mysterious strangers. But I go anyway, because that's where my certainty broke open. That's where I learned that being a scientist doesn't mean rejecting mystery. It means being humble enough to admit when you've witnessed something beyond your current understanding." Sarah left guiding afterwards, not because of what happened, but because it freed her somehow. She'd been punishing herself for 8 years, putting herself back in the mountains like she could undo her mistake through sheer exposure. But after that Christmas, she stopped. She opened a small bookstore in her town. She says she's happier. I believe her. Tommy and Nicole got married last spring. I was invited to the wedding. In his speech, Tommy talked about unexpected gifts, about signs that appear when you need them most. He didn't mention the mountains directly, but he looked at me when he said it. I nodded. I understood. People ask me sometimes if I think we hallucinated the whole thing, if maybe we were all suffering from altitude sickness or some kind of shared delusion. I've considered that. I've researched mass hallucination events, psychological phenomena that can explain shared experiences. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe our brains created something we needed to see, something to shake us out of our patterns. But that doesn't explain the flowers. It doesn't explain how all three of us saw the same impossible things. It doesn't explain the storm warning that saved our lives. It doesn't explain how a stranger knew intimate details about our lives that we'd never shared with anyone. So I'm left with uncertainty. And I've come to peace with that. The most important things I've learned in my life haven't come from certainty. They've come from moments when my understanding shattered, and I had to build something new from the pieces. I don't know what we encountered in those mountains. An angel, maybe, if you believe in such things. A hallucination if you don't. An interdimensional being, an alien, a manifestation of something in our own consciousness that we don't yet understand. I have theories. I have possibilities, but I don't have answers. What I have instead is the memory of warm ground in winter, of flowers blooming where they shouldn't, of a stranger who saw through us completely and offered us exactly what we needed, even though we didn't know we needed it. I have the memory of walking back to camp with 2 other people, all of us changed in ways we couldn't articulate, carrying impossible flowers that stayed alive long enough to teach us something. I'm a scientist. I'm supposed to deal in facts and evidence and reproducible results. And I do. I still collect rock samples. I still analyze data. I still publish papers in geology journals. But now I do it with the understanding that the universe is bigger and stranger than my instruments can measure. That reality has layers and depths and thin places where something else bleeds through. If you'd asked me 5 years ago if I believed in miracles, I would have said no. Definitively, scientifically, no. If you ask me now, I'll tell you about Christmas Day in the Sierra Nevada, about flowers in snow, about a man who knew our names and our pain and showed us warmth where there should have been only cold. And I'll tell you honestly that I don't know what to call it. But I know it changed me. I know it was real, whatever real means. Maybe that's what miracles are. Not violations of natural law, but moments when we're present enough to see the laws we don't understand yet. Moments when the universe shows us we're smaller than we think and more connected than we believe. Moments when someone or something reaches across the boundary and reminds us that wonder is still possible, that impossible things happen, that we're allowed to not have all the answers. I keep a pressed flower in my desk drawer. It's brown now, fragile, but I can still see the yellow petals, still remember how it felt warm in my hand. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, and I'm back in those mountains watching a stranger walk through rock, feeling my certainty crumble and something else take its place. Something better. Thank you for letting me share this with you. I know it's a strange story. I know it's easier to dismiss it than to sit with the discomfort of not understanding. But if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, something that changed you despite your inability to rationalize it, then maybe this makes sense to you. Maybe you know what it's like to carry an impossible memory and have it become the most real thing in your life. We don't always get explanations. Sometimes we just get moments. And sometimes, that has to be enough. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own encounters with the unexplainable, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your own experiences in the comments. I read everyone, and I'm fascinated by the moments when reality reveals itself to be stranger and more beautiful than we thought possible. We're all trying to make sense of this weird existence, and sometimes the best we can do is share our stories and know we're not alone in our wonder. Thanks for listening, and keep your eyes open for thin places. They're out there, waiting.